Hi, we're Pete and Deb Lincoln. We live in Lunenburg, which is some 30 miles away from Westboro, but I want to say from 86 to 96, when this place was open, we frequented as much as we possibly could. We've been told, although we weren't after such a thing, that we held the record for the most appearances there, and I think we probably hold the record for the most people we brought there. All kinds of people for different shows, but just to expose them to the folk music, the food, the atmosphere, and the people who ran the place, because it was a delightful way to spend an evening up there. To me, as an old folkie, I grew up with my mother singing old camp songs to me, way back to something like Richard Dyer Bennett or Carl Sandburg folk music. When I was in college, every single kid had the Kingston Trio on their turntables. I was involved in 4 or 5 folk singing groups, but the Old Vienna didn't open until I was 44 years old. And it perhaps given up on the folk life because there was very little folk music available when the disco craze came in. And so to suddenly discover this oasis, is the way I used to think of it, on a Friday night after a tough week of teaching school, I could go down and go in and have a meal of Wiener Schnitzel and John Hardy beer, go upstairs and meet these, Thomas Hardy beer, I'm getting old, meet these 2 fellows who ran the place who were completely diverse personalities. Robert Haig was a jolly man who knew all the folks, knew all his customers, very pleasant and told stories. And there was Tim, who had sort of a Rasputin sort of appearance, with his hooded eyes and his tall, sort of phantomous ways of moving around, who would get up on stage and introduce people, but also give a poem about chocolate. And he'd tell chocolate as though chocolate was a miraculous sort of, what I say, life-giving element. You had to have chocolate after you taught the Tim. And at that point, the music would begin. And it was set up so it was a small enough room so that you could be practically on top of the performers, and the seating was perfect so you could see them, as a lot of venues don't have that. And so it was a very intimate setting, even though they were playing. You didn't need blasting amplifiers, and every single performer we ever heard there was enjoyable in his own way. Some of them were rock-ish, some were folkish, some were quiet, some were profound, some were very, very comic, and they engaged the audiences in a way that most folk venues didn't. Those 10 years of going to see music, and all this, I hate to say it, 70 years or so I've watched music, exceeded any other place we ever went, and we miss it.
Deb, we were part of an open mic series that gave the rise and the growth and the platform for a lot of folks who now are selling out venues. Do you remember seeing some of those folks, or who do you remember seeing?
Oh, the open mics were outstanding, and I just want to give credit to you and Tim for finding these wonderful, wonderful people. Such a great platform for them to begin. I especially remember Jeff Bartley, who my singing group opened for him at another coffee house later on. That was really exciting. I remember Diane
Ziegler.
Diane Ziegler,
Yeah.
yeah, she was great. They were all wonderful, and the thing about the Old Vienna was it didn't matter if you knew the performers or not. We would go and see Tom Paxton, we'd go and see Dave Van Ronk, all the classic names in folk, but we would go, Leon Redbone, but we'd go and see people who we'd never heard of and become fast fans of them.
Like Duffy?
Yeah, like Duffy, Uranus. But it didn't matter. Whoever you went to see was wonderful, and you'd come away with a tape. In those days, you'd come away with a cassette tape. There weren't even CDs when we first started, and go home and play it and become a fan. The Chenille sisters, Connie Calder, all these people that, Tom Chapin, Steve Chapin, heard of Harry Chapin, but who are these brothers that were just as good, if not better than Harry? So anytime we had a free weekend night, we were at the Old Vienna. It didn't matter who was on the program, they were all wonderful. And the Old Vienna promoted these people who went on to be really special people. Don White, who knew you were going to get a comedian and a great singer?
You folks told me a story recently of a show in particular, I think, that kind of is one of your favorite memories. You want to share that?
Sure. We went to see Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart, of course, was part of the Kingston Trio, which was the group that my brother and I, at one point, could sing every single one of their songs.
He wrote the
Literally
Dave
every
Jean
one.
Believer for the Monkees,
For the
right?
Monkees,
Yeah.
but he wrote a lot of the Kingston Trio songs
Oh, yeah.
before he joined the group. And he's a terrific guitarist, not top singer, but although he did have top 40 songs, and he was playing, and Pete Kennedy, by himself before he married Maura, had been his lead-in. And Pete Kennedy is a fabulous guitarist. Jon Stewart is a fabulous guitarist. And they usually ended the shows at the Old Vienna about 11 o'clock. And that night, at 11 o'clock, when John finished, he said, "Pete, come on up here and jam with me." And the two of them, just absolutely candid, unrehearsed jam, lasted a half hour, 45 minutes, and it knocked us out. It still stands as the best impromptu session we've ever seen. And the two of them would just try to outdo each other. What was the movie where the guy made the deal with the devil and he's outplaying each other?
A Crossroads.
Crossroads. Crossroads. He could play because the devil changed. The devil was in those two guys that night.
But they were just digging
and
each
they were
other.
digging each other, big smiles on each other. I can do this, you can do this, I can do this. That was a wonderful night. And that's the sort of thing that wouldn't happen in most venues. They would be scheduled like at some place like Passim's. They would tightly schedule, you're out of here at 10:30. But the Old Vienna could allow a show like that, which was just
The other thing that
special.
was magic about the Old Vienna is, I don't know how the scheduling was done, but it always seemed like the opening act matched the person that was the performer for the star for the evening. They always seemed to sync beautifully, and I don't know how that scheduling happened, because that was genius.
That was Tim. Tim made that happen.
It was genius.
Yeah.
That was genius. And the other act that I remember that so crystallized in my mind forever was Buskin and Bateau. And Bateau was a genius on the fiddle, and they had a song called "The Boy with the Violin" that was touching, just brought you to tears every time he did it. And he busted a violin string right in the middle of the song, this touching, beautiful violin song. And he reached over and grabbed a mandolin and finished it up on the mandolin. And he became known as the boy with the mandolin after that.
The song was titled "The Boy with the Violin," so he made it "The Boy with the Mandolin." And to have that kind of stage presence, that kind of talent, just to switch instruments in the midst of a song, turn it into a great performance and a joke at the same time, show the kind of humility and talent the people up there had. And that's the kind of heartwarming thing to see. They weren't standing up there showing off and having lights flashing and fireworks going off and 55 backup singers the way some of the performers do these days. They just could, on their own, perform with sincerity and talent that was striking.
In your cabin here, we're surrounded by one of the talents that you brought to the club and continue to share. You've been taking pictures and old style film for going way back, and we're going to see some of these pictures. But when did you start taking these pictures, and what are some of these memories?
Well, my dad was a semi-professional photographer, and he had a darkroom in our house. And at 7, I knew how to develop pictures. So I started taking pictures when I was in college for our yearbooks. And when I was at school, I took all the yearbook pictures for 10 or 12 years. So I was always taking pictures. We started going to see folk music. When I started myself, some of these pictures I have over here, I took in 1964. I had one roll of black and white film. I took 20 pictures there, and about 15 of them are classics. It's Odetta and Pete Seeger and Joan Baez and Doc Watson and Dave Van Ronk.
These at Newport?
This is at Newport in 1964 at the blues tournament. Since then, every time we've gone to anything, I've taken pictures of folk singers. And the deal was, when we got married, I would take the picture, blow it up, and the next time we saw the performer, Deb would go see him and have it sign it. She could talk to the Queen, it doesn't bother her. I'm a little shy about that. And as we wrote in our book, the only person that ever gave her any trouble was Pete Seeger. And interestingly, when we took that, we discovered that Pete Seeger had stage fright. You wouldn't think so.
Oh, huh.
But he had to psych himself up and prepare to go on stage. And when she approached him with a picture that I think was a delightful picture I took in '64, he said, no, I can't sign it. And his wife came over and said, Pete, come on, sign it for her. But a lot of the performers are glad to. And a few of them have been used in their CD covers or tape covers. But it's become, as you can see, a hobby and something that is a way of keeping. We like to think when we walk in this room, they're all singing to us at once. And look at them and hear them all. Some of them passed away, but I can look up and see that picture right now of Peter Kane and Bill Morrissey and think, what a couple of great guys. And I've got them, they're here. The thing I'd like to share about folk music is that trans folk music, not necessarily singer-songwriter music, but folk music transcends generations. In fact, many of the songs that are sung now are 200-300 years old, variations of them. And it's a type of music that doesn't age, it doesn't divide the generations. If anything, it can unite them. Go to a camp sometimes, listen to camp songs. Those songs have been around generation after generation. That's folk music. It's not someone who has honed some particular skill only for the cognoscenti to really appreciate. Something like the incredible string band, you have to be educated to really understand the nuances of it. But basic folk music is people from the folk, and the folk don't have any generation, they're generational. So coming to something like what you're planning to do, I think will appeal to every generation.
What I would say is that if you had been to the Old Vienna, you know what we lost. And if you hadn't been to the Old Vienna, come to this event because you'll get a taste of what it was. And it was so special, it's not ever to be missed.
That's right, and never to be duplicated, because I've been going to folk venues, still do. We were one yesterday, and it's never been duplicated. There's something about the whole atmosphere there. The food, the eating is important, and most of the places either had no food or just junk food. This place was a great restaurant and a great warming. It was almost like going to someone's home and we're going to go see Robert as well as the music.
And if the Old Vienna can live on through this event, that's awesome. Please come.